Good morning, Big Orange Nation. Good morning, Vol Nation. Welcome into the first episode of the Volcast podcast. Coming to you live from the Big Apple, we're going to be talking about all things Tennessee athletics, all things volunteers, and diving into the weekly discussion as we get ready for the upcoming week. We're recording this episode 1 on April 9th, 2025. Lots to discuss. Going to use this as a little bit of a State of the Union for Tennessee athletics and where some of these programs are. Today, specifically diving into the basketball program, men's basketball specifically for this podcast. And we just want to welcome you in. What are we looking for in terms of this podcast? What is it going to bring? The goal here is to have some really solid, honest discourse about Tennessee athletics. Weekly, bi-weekly episodes maybe in the future. Really diving into what's going on, what's the 411, what's happening. We're going to be reacting to things. We're going to be updating you as things come out, as news breaks and whatnot, and just really excited to be here. You can find me over on Twitter at Vol_cast. That's where a lot of the engagement is going to be taking place, maybe looking into Discord in the future, but really just want the opportunity here to come here to discuss things in Tennessee sports world and really have a place where we can have open, honest discussions, some realistic point of views, some fan point of views, no connections in terms of insider info and any of that, just really what the fans are feeling, voicing concerns, voicing opinions, voicing things that are going really well, things we're happy about, and moving on from there. So really excited to bring this to you as an opportunity here for myself and to grow a community and to really discuss all things Tennessee. Today is going to be really an opportunity to go in and talk about the men's basketball program. We're going to talk about the end of the season. We're going to talk about transfers. We're going to talk about guys graduating. We're going to talk about things that really went well this season, things that didn't go well this season. We're going to talk about roster construction for next season, incoming freshmen, transfers, like I said, Rick Barnes, recruiting elite talent. Is it attainable to win a national championship? All of those things, and we'll get started with that right now. So we want to jump in and just talk about the end of the season for Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee drops to Houston in the Elite Eight. Really had a hard time getting over that Elite Eight hump the last 2 years. Ran into some absolute buzzsaws. But Tennessee falls to Houston 69-50, and at times it didn't really feel that close. The first half for Tennessee was one to forget. Really a historically bad first half for performance by any team, and Tennessee just happens to be that team this year. Houston is a fantastic program. Kelvin Sampson is a fantastic coach. They go on to lose in the national championship after having a huge opportunity to win it, but we can discuss that at a later date, but we're talking about Tennessee today. Great program, a lot of talent on that team, built the team the right way, great transfer pickups. They've got a huge recruiting class coming in. Houston's just a really great program. And Tennessee played to their seed line, and they win all their games as the favorite, and they go into their first game as the underdog, and they lose. You could lose by 100, you could lose by 1. I'd rather lose by 100 personally because it wasn't close and my heart doesn't get ripped out, but it still seems to get ripped out when it comes to this team, and really we'll dive into that here. Tennessee finishes the season with 30-plus wins, an Elite Eight berth, losing in the SEC title game. And I think this team exceeded expectations. If you told me coming into the season that this team would play for an SEC title and they would lose in an Elite Eight game to a 1 seed, I probably would have signed up for that. We all want to win the national championship. Unfortunately, one team is the only team that can do it. 63 teams are going to be heartbroken every single year, and Tennessee was one of those 63 this year in the tournament. But the standard has been elevated because of these last 2 seasons. This season particularly, Dalton Connect was a real lightning in a bottle type moment. Just striking while the iron was hot. They hit on this kid, and he was incredible and an elite scorer and an NBA player. And they just it catapulted them into the stratosphere of what this program could be. And coming off of losing him and losing a number of seniors, Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, you're talking about losing 2 big transfers in Jonas Adu and Tobe Awaka. Basically, you're starting front court at center, and having to replenish that and losing Dalton Connect, right? It's just a lot of question marks coming into the season. How would Tennessee how would they react? How would they, move forward? And, bringing in Chaz, bringing in Igor Milicic, bringing in Felix Okpara, right? Bringing in Darlingstone, Dubar, having this team be centered around Zakai, Zeigler, and Jahmai Mashack in your backcourt, and having Jordan Gainey take the next step to being what I consider the sixth man of the year. He was good enough to start at 99% of programs in the country. He's a sixth man here, and he was fantastic. But my point was, this team was a team that was looking like it was going to take a step backwards, losing an elite talent in Dalton Connect, and they were just as good, if not better. I think that they win the SEC regular season last season, and that's probably why last season's team ends up being better. But again, you're splitting hairs here. Similar amount of wins, 30-plus wins. The team was great last year. The team was great this year. So I think they met expectations, if only exceeding expectations. So I really can't say a bad thing about that. The real sour note for this season is the end of Zakai, Zeigler, and Jahmai Mashack's time here at Tennessee. Over the course of a 4-year span, they are the two winningest players in program history. They've recited over 4 25-plus win seasons, and two guys that came in here as kids, left as young men, will never have to pay for a meal in Knoxville ever again. You talk about just great people through and through, really connected with the community. We'll talk about each individually. Zakai Zeigler is the little engine that could. I know people don't like to make it about his height, and by people I mean Tennessee fans. The national media loves to make it about his height. At the end of every sentence when he's spoken about, they remind everybody that he's not tall. But that's a whole nother discussion. In the age of the beginning of the NIL portal, Zakai Zeigler could have hit the portal last season after having a great season, Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC, being such a fantastic player on both ends of the court. And he could have jumped ship and went and had a 7-figure deal with ease. I mean, you see what some of these kids are getting nowadays with ease. And he stays at Tennessee, wants to build something. And I think it shows a lot of character with him, but it also shows a lot of good character with the culture that Rick Barnes has built. Can't really think of another coach in college basketball who preaches so much about culture and character as the Deacon Rick Barnes. I think it's really important as a player. If you buy into that, you're going to get rewarded. And Rick has shown that time and time again during his time in Knoxville. And that's a huge recruiting point for the right kind of player, for the right kind of young man. And I think that's Zakai is the perfect encapsulation of that. He could have left. He could have went and made $1 million plus and decides to stay. Now, he definitely was rewarded for staying financially. But, in the age of the NIL, the fact that he stayed for 4 years after a big injury too, it really shows the kind of kid that he is. And, we're going to miss him. He's one of the all-time greats here. His number absolutely deserves to be retired. He not only was a fantastic player, but was a fantastic leader in this program. I wish him the absolute best. My dream is for him to come back as a coach and be a bench coach for Rick and eventually take over one day. I think that would be great. I think the same thing for Shaq. You could say the same thing. And we'll use that to segue to Jahmai Mashack. The best on-ball defender I've seen here at this university in recent years. And in the country, I think he deserved to be the Defensive Player of the Year. It's really a travesty that him and Zakai split votes for National Defensive Player of the Year, and Kalkbrenner on Creighton ends up getting it. I think Jahmai Mashack is the best defensive on-ball player I have seen in a very long time. He was a stopper. You see what he did to Trey Johnson in the SEC tournament. He is a fantastic, fantastic defender and rebounder. The offense never really got it together. He's a guy who's going to take 2 or 3 shots a game, probably 2 layups and maybe a wide-open 3. But he played his role perfectly. He's a Torchbearer Award winner here at Tennessee. There's no higher honor at this university, and he holds that. One of the first athletic members of a program team to be bestowed that honor, and it goes to show how much of a great young man he is, and the exact type of guy that Rick Barnes wants on this team representing this university. Jahmai is one of the winningest players in Tennessee history. He will go down as one of the best defensive players to ever play here. And I mean, it's just another guy who is the perfect encapsulation of what type of player Rick Barnes wants at this university. To Zakai and Jahmai, you just, all you can say is thank you. 4 great years. You've catapulted this team into having the expectation of competing for an SEC championship and a national title every single year. Something they did. Whether or not they won those early on games in 20 and 21 and 22, it doesn't matter. This is a team that now is expecting to win 25 plus games, right? And that was the expectation that they built along with Rick Barnes. And that's all you can really say is thank you, because they were fantastic players, fun to watch, easy to root for. I was rooting for them more than I was for myself to win as a fan. You wanted it for them. All the hard work they put in for 4 years. And Rick Barnes makes them work hard. So you just say thank you to those guys. The other guys we want to talk about are obviously transfer guys. We'll single out Jordan Gainey first because he was transferred from 2 years ago. What a rise in prominence for Jordan Gainey. 1 games by himself this year. The Illinois game at the buzzer beater was fantastic. But, last year looking back, you saw a little bit of this potential with him coming off the bench and having some moments where he could put up 8 to 10 points in a 5-minute stretch. And really, he could be a spark plug off your bench to really, sort of catapult your team. When Dalton wasn't going or when Josiah wasn't going or what have you. You really got to thank Jordan Gainey for these 2 years. He was a fantastic player. The only player in that Houston game who brought them back. 10 quick points in like a 3-minute span for him. He couldn't miss. And, Jordan is a great young man. Father, obviously, Justin on the bench for this team as a coach. And, just thank those guys. And then you move on to the transfers for this specific year. You've got Chaz, you've got Darlingstone, you've got Felix, and you've got Igor. Felix will be back, but I think, Felix played well in his role this year. I think people wanting him to be a back-to-the-basket guy, you're not going to get that. We told you that in the beginning of the year. He's a pick-and-roll type of guy who's going to finish above the rim. He's going to rebound at a high rate, and he's going to be a great shot blocker and rim protector, and that's what he does. I think we're looking for him to take the next step. In terms of Chaz, obviously the Jerry West Award winner, the best shooting guard in the nation, the best three-point shooting season in the history of Tennessee basketball. Not going to put him above Chris in terms of being the best shooter that we've seen here. But again, had the best season, had the most makes. Chaz was absolutely electric this season, picking up right where Dalton left off. Not quite as good off the dribble in terms of finishing at the rim like Dalton was, being explosive, but a better shooter. So, you thank Chaz for coming here, a Tennessee native. He was fantastic. You can only thank these guys for continuing to build upon this program's success. Darlingstone Dubar, a guy who everything went wrong for this guy over the summer. You feel terrible for him. A lot of stuff in his personal life kind of put him behind the 8 ball with the team. Had to step away before the season started and a little bit into the season. And, it just never got himself into that rotation. I was really excited about him. I'm a New York guy. He's a Hofstra guy. I was really excited to see him go down there and really, give it his all and show what he can do. And he hit some big shots throughout the season. One thing I'll never forget about Darlingstone Dubar, not shy, right? Not trigger shy when it comes to shooting. He'd get in the game, and the first time he'd get a touch, he'd shoot a 3. Whether it was 5 feet behind the three-point line or right on the line. He's always looking at the rim, looking to score. So I appreciate that about him. You wish him the best. You thank him for being here. I wish, we all wish that things would have been a little different in terms of how the season started, but he played his role that was, carved out for him throughout the year really well. And I think that, just wishing him the best. And then Igor Milicic. I think a lot of Tennessee fans are a little bit harsh with Igor. The 121st transfer ranking per on 3 last year. Stretch 4. I think a lot of people saw him shooting 3s last year at Charlotte and thought, wow, this is perfect. We've got a guy who can rebound, a 7-footer who can shoot 3s. This is fantastic. And Igor did hit some big shots, and I want to give him credit for that. The biggest one for me out of the half against Missouri when they're losing in Knoxville, he hits a big shot to kind of open the second half up. And, he was never afraid to shoot that 3 from the top of the key. Struggled offensively throughout the season. But when he was getting downhill and making those open 3s, and he was a menace rebounding. Our best rebounder, right? Our best rebounder. You just thank him for playing, and I know he had some questionable decisions late in games, and I think that, that's what fans tend to really remember when you're not a superstar player. They tend to remember role players making mistakes, and you have to remember these are kids, man. This guy's 22 years old. He's played basketball in college for 4 years, and he's going to make mistakes. It's not the NBA, and that's part of the allure of college basketball. So with Igor, you really just say, thanks. We appreciate you. You played well this season. You had some moments. We all had some moments. Chaz had some moments. Darlingstone had some moments. Felix had some moments. So, it is what it is. Not everybody's going to play to the best of their ability throughout the entire season. So that's a big thing. But those 4 transfer guys, we just say thank you. This is Zakai, Jahmai, we say thank you. Felix, back next year. Excited to see what's happening. What we'll do now is we'll sort of discuss next season's expectations, right? First of all, looking back on this past season, the things that went right were this team was defensively a juggernaut. With rebounding the basketball, they were a juggernaut. The only time they struggled was when they happened to play teams that were slightly better than them at those 2 specific things. Houston, for example, a better defensive team. If Tennessee's number 2, Houston's number 1. And we saw that in the first half of that game in the Elite Eight. Rebounding, we saw them struggle against Texas A&M, who was the number 1 rebounding team, especially offensive rebounding. But Tennessee really imposed their will all season long. They were a dominant team in terms of physicality, and that's what went right. They dominated. They had an elite three-point shooter. They had an amazing point guard who was running the floor, making the right pass, leading the league in assists, an all-defensive player. And that's the thing. Jahmai, Mashack, and Zakai Zeigler were the best defensive backcourt in college basketball. Chaz Lanier was the best shooter in college basketball, the best shooting guard. They had an elite 6-man in Jordan Gainey, and they had a rim defender in Felix Okpara that fit perfectly. You look at some other players on the team. Cade Phillips played his role perfectly. Right? A bull in the china shop type of kid who lives above the rim. Love Cade Phillips. Plays with an edge. Love having him on this team, and I love his future on this team. What went wrong? The big issue that I'm finding with Tennessee as I look back and I watch the game over and over again is the lack of interior scoring was a huge problem with this team. Why? Because if you don't have someone who can put their back to the basket down on the block, get an entry pass, and go to work and collapse a defense, you're going to become reliant on scoring from outside of 15 feet. And that's what ended up happening. Tennessee shot the most jump shots in the country of any team. They finished at the rim very little, unless on alley-oops or, passes that were, pick and roll, where there's no popping. You're just running right to the rim and finishing for a layup on screen and rolls and things of that nature. So that was really the big thing. They became reliant on the jump shot, and in some games they became reliant on the three-pointer. The first game in Florida, the game against Kentucky at home where they shot like 8 for 46, and then the first half against Houston. Those were the big 3 for me when looking for, what were the issues? They struggled to get the ball inside and score, and they had to rely on running a lot of screens off of the big men. Your pin-down screens, your elevator screens, your back screens, to get Chaz, to get Jordan, to get Zakai open for deep looks. And when they were making those threes, they were one of the best teams in the country. And when they struggled to make those threes, they turned into a team that really didn't belong on the same floor as a team like Houston, a team like Florida. And so that was the struggle, right? Tennessee was in the really good team tier this year, just not elite. And that happens. You can't be elite, every single year. I'm not sure they were elite last year. They were a little bit closer because of the upside of Connect. But, again, I don't think that this team played below its expectation. I think they played exactly what they were supposed to be. They were a physical, dominating defensive team who rebounded the heck out of the ball and shot pretty well. And when they didn't shoot very well, it all sort of collapsed. And that happens. Right? Unfortunately, it happens on the biggest stage. That really sucks. There's really nowhere else to put it. So now we've sort of talked about what happened last year. Let's look forward here. We've got next year's roster expectations, and we'll talk about sort of roster construction and what's going on there. Right now on roster, you've got 4 returning players. You've got Bishop Boswell, J.P. Estrella, Cade Phillips, and Felix Okpara. It's confirmed that Felix is coming back, which is great. I was a little bit concerned last week. I originally recorded a pod where I said, don't be surprised, if these guys test the waters. Decided to hold that because of the news about transfers coming in, but we'll talk about that later. So right now it looks like those four are going to be back. You've got Boswell, who looks like a combo guard. I struggled to sort of find a role this season. I don't think Rick really trusted him in important moments. Some turnover issues, some kind of lapses on defense. That'll happen. True freshman, it happens. JP Estrella obviously gets lost to injury in the beginning of the season. Really gutted for him when that happened. He's the guy who you can look to in the future for a back-to-the-basket type of score. I think he has that game. And I think losing him early on was a big issue in that front in terms of getting offense out of your center position. Cade Phillips will be back. We talked about him. Bull in the China shop. Would have loved to see him and Tobe Awaka playing together, just creating chaos and mauling guys on the boards and all that. Love Cade Phillips. Can play power forward, can play center, can really do it all. Got to sort of refine him a little bit in terms of his touches, but again, that's going to happen. He's a sophomore. He's going to come back and be better. And then you've got Felix coming back for his senior year. And I think that he's going to take a step. I'm not sure the offense is ever going to get there. People always ask me, a little quick side note, people always say, well, how come this guy doesn't have the ability to catch the ball, make a move, and go up over his right shoulder? It's because Felix Okpara is a super athletic 7-foot guy. All the guys who are 7 feet tall and are 22 years old who can score are all in the NBA. They're all professional basketball players because it's really hard for that skill set to be developed by a guy that size. Felix checks all the boxes in terms of athleticism and defensive play. He struggles offensively, and that's why he's still a college basketball player. He's a really good college basketball player. And if he can unlock that somehow this season, he's a guy who could be an NBA roster type of guy. He'll need to really develop that. But again, that's my point. I just wanted to really wax poetic on that for a sec. In terms of incoming freshmen, you've got 3 right now. You've got Amari Evans, who's a top 75 recruit, shooting guard, small forward, 4-star, from Overtime Elite. I love his game. Think Jahmai Mashack physically, but a little bit more of a polished offensive player coming in. I think that he can make some noise in this rotation early on in the season. We'll have to see if he develops Rick's trust, which is always the big thing with these type of guys. You've got Dwayne Brown coming in, a top 100 recruit. 4-star power forward center. I see him listed as a center, but again, I think his size is a little bit power forwardy. He's smaller, 6'9", 230. He's got a little bit of Dwan Blair type of stuff to him. He can stretch it a little bit. He can get down there and score for you. We're going to see how he adjusts to playing defense in the SEC, and we're going to see how he adjusts there to finding a role in this team. And then a late commit, you've got 3-star point guard Troy Henderson. I like Troy Henderson's game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the guy who tends to be a little bit smaller is Zakai Zeigler 2.0. I don't think that's the case, but I do see a guy who's very quick off the dribble, who looks to pass, plays hard on the defensive end, and he can even rise up and shoot. So I like his game. I think that he's a solid player. Don't really see much in year one, but again, we'll see what happens. You never know. Could find diamonds in the rough, and I think Rick has proven he's pretty good at that. Then we're going to talk about transfers. 2 transfers have committed in the last week to the University of Tennessee. You've got the big one in point guard Jacoby Gillespie from Maryland, one of the best point guards in the country this last year, a top 5 transfer rating in terms of what On3 and what 247 have as their transfer portals. I've got him in the top 10 for me personally in terms of transfer portal ranking. This is his team now, right away. Right, he's a Greenville, Tennessee native. He grew up watching Tennessee games in Neyland, so this is a slam dunk. He's a great player, a scoring point guard who can facilitate. He's got great size, great speed, good with the handle, can run an offense. It was his team at Maryland to run. Derek Queen obviously is going to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft this upcoming year. And it was his team in terms of scoring, but Gillespie is such a talented player that I think this is a slam dunk for Tennessee. I'm so happy that Rick Barnes got this done. He didn't even make it to his trip to Villanova to see his old coach, so this is a huge step in the right direction. And then Jaylen Carey, younger brother of Vernon Carey, who used to play at Duke, who's the son of Vernon Carey Sr., who used to be an athlete himself, pretty solid one if you ask me. Jaylen Carey, power forward, Vanderbilt. This is a little bit of the rich get richer in terms of our front court because I loved Jaylen Carey's game. In both games against Vanderbilt, this kid plays with an edge. He is an interior scorer who can give you 8 to 10 points a night from the block, which is awesome. That's exactly what I've been saying that this team is missing. I think this is another slam dunk. I really like Jaylen Carey's game. I think that he's going to be a really solid player here. I could see him starting at power forward immediately, like right away. He is really solid. He's got a couple years of eligibility left as well, so I really like this move. And I also, you can't help but love the fact that he just scorns Vanderbilt, in his first interview about, being in Knoxville and playing for the Vols. So you really love that. I love his game. It's exactly what we've been missing this year. Having him on one side with Felix on the other playing off each other is also really solid. I think he's a good passer out of the post. So I like Carey a lot. I think that entry pass into scoring some points down on the block from the post is really something that will unlock this team in terms of getting better looks, being a more well-rounded offense, being a little bit more unique in terms of what you give teams to look at. So I really like Jaylen Carey there. Those are the two kids. So right now you've got, 6 guys on roster, 3 incoming freshmen, 9 guys. If the scholarship limit goes up to, 15, they're going to have to bring in more guys. I went into this saying that Tennessee needs 4 to 6 transfer guys, and I think 5 is the perfect number. They still need a shooting guard, and we're going to segue perfectly in. The big name to watch right now on campus today, old former teammate of Jacoby Gillespie at Maryland, shooting guard Rodney Rice. I would be stunned if Rick Barnes lets Rodney Rice leave campus today without an NIL deal. I would be stunned. I think it's the perfect match. You get guys who have played together, who have that, comfortability. They're connected to each other. They know each other. It seems like they're best buds, and it feels a lot like Zakai and Jahmai. You've got these 2 guys in your backcourt who are connected, who are great players. So I think Rodney Rice is going to be a Vol. It seems to be trending that way. He's got another Villanova visit scheduled for later in the week, but I would be stunned if Rick Barnes lets him leave today without that offer, without locking that down. And Gillespie's going to be there, right? He's going to be there walking around campus with him, talking with the coaches with him. So it seems like he's pushing for this really hard and lobbying, and I think it's a slam dunk. You just rebuild your backcourt in 2 weeks, which is really hard to do. But that's the state of college basketball these days. Another name to watch, you've got Alvaro Folgueras, power forward from Robert Morris, international guy. Really like his game. Apparently he was going to Kentucky. Now we're seeing maybe that's off the table because they brought in, another power forward. So for me, if he's available, he's available. But you're going to have a pretty lockjam front court. So we'll see what Rick wants to do with that. I like his game. Similar to Carey. Physical guy who can play pretty much anywhere and can stretch it a little bit for some deeper jumpers that I think Carey doesn't really have in his repertoire. But again, I think that Alvaro would be a pretty solid pickup. Some other guys that I like with potential: Lamar Wilkerson, the shooting guard from Sam Houston State. I haven't seen anything on him being signed yet, so that could be a possibility as well. Bringing him in if Rodney Rice doesn't work out. So we'll see what happens there. And then let's talk about the big freshman news. Nate Amen is still out there. I'm not really sure what's going on with this kid. I've seen his recruitment has been reopened and pushed back, his signing day, like 4 or 5 times now. So some places have it down to Duke and Tennessee as the final 2. Jacoby Gillespie apparently knows him. There's some connection there, and Gillespie immediately said in his introduction that he's lobbying for Rodney Rice and Nate Amen to get down here, to get to Knoxville. So who knows? But that would be really exciting. Nate Amen is the number 4 overall recruit at a high school, probably a one-and-done type of guy, maybe 2 years. So lock him up and get him in there, and then you got to let him play. He's a power forward too. So we'll see what happens there. But I really like his game. Long, reminds me a lot of Julian Phillips with a little bit more of a polished offensive game, if you will. Less defensive focus. So I really like Nate Amen. I'm hoping he picks Tennessee. Duke is tough. They just bring in stud after stud after stud. How do you compete with these guys? You got to find a way. The first way to do it is to get these guys. Rick has shown that he can recruit top 5 recruits. He's got a handful of them in his time here and having 5 stars. So I don't think it's going to be really that much of an issue. But that's looking like your roster right there. You lose Cam Carr. Another thing, you miss Cam Carr a little bit, but if it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right fit. I can't knock him for it. I think he would have came back from that injury in the second half of the season and played a little bit more of a prominent role, but you'll never know. And you wish him the best. I'm not going to have any ill will. It never really worked. So, it is what it is. I don't think Tennessee's missing out on a superstar, and I don't think Cam Carr is missing out on anything important here at this point. If he thinks it's not the right fit or he wants to be closer to home or whatever. So you move on from that. We'll talk briefly. We're coming up on about 30 minutes here. We'll talk briefly about Rick Barnes. I think Rick Barnes is the man for the job. I see a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's the same thing over and over and over again. You know how hard it is to win as a non-blue blood in college basketball? You know how hard it is to win against these programs? Florida is not a blue blood. They just won their 5th national championship, right? And they're still kind of knocking on the door for blue blood, right, because of the lack of history. It's really hard to win, in college basketball. Rick Barnes has a certain identity that he wants for his team, defensive, juggernaut mindset, wants to be an angry, physical team, and sometimes you run into some issues with that. I thought that he coached really well this year. I thought what he did with the offense, having no inside presence once J.P. Estrella went down, changing the offense up to focus more on perimeter looks off of screens, I thought was fantastic coaching. He made some great adjustments to games this season, specifically in the second game against Florida and Knoxville, and specifically in the Sweet 16 game against Kentucky. He outcoached Todd Golden and outcoached Mark Pope, and I thought that he coached really well this year. There's nobody I'd rather want as the coach of this team. We'll see if he still has it in him to get out there and recruit that elite talent like I meant. He's getting older. And, listen, it's the same thing with a guy like Kelvin Sampson. Do you want to recruit these elite high school kids and hope they pan out and they leave in a year, or do you want to recruit in the portal? And I think Rick has decided that the portal is the easy way to go. Let's get guys who fit our culture out of high school, and let's go and get portal kids and mold them to our culture. And I think it's working. They just need something to get them over the hump. And we talked about that. How does that happen, right? Is it attainable? Well, of course it's attainable. You've got to get past that Elite 8 hump, of course. And there were some issues in both previous teams, with Dalton's team and this year with Chaz's, era, if you will. I call it Dalton's era so we can sort of, differentiate. But you've got to be able to score from all 3 levels, and you've got to be able to play good defense. And Tennessee is right there. They're right there. They're a really, really, really good team. They're just not a great team. They're just not an elite team. And I think Rick Barnes has them in the right direction. I think if you get Rodney Rice to pair with Jacoby Gillespie, and I think if you go out, you got to get a wing. You got to get 2 small forwards. And if you can get Nate Ament also, I think this team has the same expectations, right? Get to a Final Four. That's all the fans want. Get to a Final Four. I think it's doable. I think it's possible. I think from now the standard should be Elite 8, Final Four. Get there, make it happen. And I think that that's what we need to look at going forward as fans, right? Winning the national championship is really hard. You got to be really good all season. And realistically, you got to be a 1 or a 2 or a 3 seed, right? Or be a really good team preseason and struggle and then be like an 8 seed, like UConn and Kentucky. So, again, blue bloods. So, that's what you got to do, right? You got to get that 1 seed. They struggled the last 2 years to get that 1 seed late. And you see, now instead of playing against a team like Tennessee, you got to play against a team like Houston. And, that's that. So the 2024-2025 season was a major success for this program. Back to the Elite 8 after people thought they would take a huge step backwards, losing a great NBA player, talent, I should say, in Dalton Connect. And they took a step forward. They played almost as well, if not better, and they got back to the same exact place. And they ran into just a better team, and that happens. So I think the ceiling for this team, if they can bring in Rice, if they can get some solid wing players to play small forward, I think that is an Elite 8 type of team again. I think it's a team that competes for the SEC regular season title. Florida is losing a lot, right? We talked about that. Florida's going to lose a lot. Texas A&M just lost their head coach. Mizzou's bringing in a pretty good class this season. And Kentucky's bringing in a really good class this season. So there are opportunities to win the SEC. Alabama's going to be good again. right? We know this. Ole Miss is probably going to be good again. We know this. So, continue the process. Continue to do what Rick Barnes is doing. Try and win the SEC. Get a 1 seed and get to the Final Four. Those are the big things. Is it attainable? Of course it is. This is the NIL. You can reload. There's no such thing as rebuilding right now. You reload. You take your good players and you get better players around them. And I think that that's possible. If they bring in a Ment and he hits, it's a Final Four team, right? But we got to see how this team will gel. For me right now, the expectation is to get right back to where you were and see if you can get over the hump. And that's really the goal. So with that, we'll leave you. We'll have, some more stuff later on in the week. Had a great first episode. Happy to be here. Really glad again. Follow me on Twitter at Vol_cast. This has been the Volcast Podcast. This is April 9th. We're going to be back here talking next week about Tennessee's baseball schedule, how things are looking from that respect, and then continue to talk about the weekend series. We'll talk about football, having some scrimmages now, and we'll continue to cover the transfer portal. So stay locked in, stay tuned, and we will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. Great rest of your week, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you soon.